The day started out beautifully, almost poetic in its simplicity. I had planned the perfect anniversary for Jenna and me, a small surprise dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date. It had been 10 years, a milestone we should have celebrated together, but as the day progressed, the weight of Jenna's absence hung heavy. She called me in the morning, her voice hurried and distracted. "I'll be a bit late tonight," she said. "Work emergency. I'll call you as soon as I'm free." I understood. Jenna's job as a project manager often demanded her attention, even at odd hours. I smiled to myself, deciding to let her work and surprise her later at home instead. But as the hours ticked by and her silence stretched longer than usual, doubt began to creep in. By the time evening arrived, I sat alone at our dining table, staring at the untouched candles and neatly plated dinner. The clock chimed 10 when her text finally came. "Running late. Don't wait up." I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself a drink and stared out the window, wondering when everything had begun to feel so hollow. It wasn't just tonight. It had been months, months of distance, of late-night meetings, of "I'm too tired." It was subtle at first, but it became impossible to ignore. Tonight, though, something felt different. The gnawing unease in my chest wouldn't let me rest. On impulse, I grabbed my coat and keys. Maybe I'd take a drive to clear my head. As I stepped outside, the cool air bit at my skin, but the briskness grounded me. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I ended up near her office. The building was dark, as I expected it to be so late. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed something. A sleek black car pulling out of the lot. Jenna was in the passenger seat, laughing. My heart stopped. It wasn't her laughter that froze me. It was who she was with. A man I didn't recognize, leaning too close, his hand brushing hers on the console. I followed them, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. They didn't go to another office, or even a late-night coffee spot. They went to a small hotel off the main road. I watched as they entered, Jenna smiling in a way she hadn't for me in years. For a long time, I sat in my car, my mind a chaotic swirl of denial and anger. This couldn't be happening. Not Jenna. Not the woman I'd loved and built a life with. But deep down, I knew it was true. And as I drove home in the silence of my car, one thought repeated itself like a mantra. This wasn't over. The next morning felt surreal. I woke up in the guest room, unable to face the bed Jenna and I had shared for years. The image of her walking into that hotel burned in my mind like a cruel brand. I couldn't shake it, no matter how much I wanted to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Jenna came home around 7 a.m., looking disheveled but composed. Her usual confidence was replaced by something else, nervous energy. She set her purse on the counter, poured herself a cup of coffee, and sat across from me at the dining table. "You're up early," she said with forced casualness, her voice unusually chipper. I stared at her, saying nothing. She fidgeted under my gaze. "Rough night at work," she added. "That new project is really kicking my ass." My heart twisted. The lies came so easily to her now. "I went by your office last night," I said quietly, my voice steady. Her eyes darted up to meet mine, wide and startled. "What? Why?" "I wanted to surprise you. You know, for our anniversary." Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, babe, I'm so sorry I missed it. Work just got crazy. I was in meetings all night." I leaned forward, my fingers gripping the edge of the table. Was the meeting at a hotel? Her coffee cup slipped slightly in her hand, a small clatter that spoke louder than words. For a moment, we stared at each other, the silence between us unbearable. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, but her voice faltered. "Stop," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "I saw you, Jenna. I saw you with him. I followed you." "I know." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down and confess. But instead, her lips tightened, her eyes narrowing with defiance. "So what?" she snapped, slamming her coffee cup onto the table. "What were you doing following me? Spying on me? That's psychotic, you know that?" I blinked, stunned at her audacity. "You cheated on me, Jenna. Don't try to twist this." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Cheated? Please. Do you even realize how absent you've been? how lonely I felt. You're so wrapped up in your little world. You didn't even notice when I started slipping away. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lonely? I said, my voice rising. You didn't say a word, Jenna. Not once. And now you're blaming me for your affair? She shrugged, crossing her arms. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to find it somewhere else. The words hit like a sledgehammer. I wanted to scream, to tell her how wrong she was, how much I'd tried. But her expression, a mix of anger and indifference, left me speechless. Finally, I stood, my hands trembling. If that's how you feel, then maybe we should stop pretending this marriage means anything to you. She didn't answer, her silence more damning than any response. Without another word, I walked upstairs, slamming the door behind me. But even as I sat alone in our room, rage simmering under the surface, one thought consumed me. She wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. For the rest of the day, I moved like a ghost through my own house. Jenna avoided me entirely, leaving her half-finished coffee on the counter and retreating to our bedroom. When I passed by, I could hear her talking on the phone, her voice hushed but frantic. I didn't need to guess who she was speaking to. I spent those hours thinking, replaying her words over and over in my head. She had tried to pin her betrayal on me, as if the years I had poured into this marriage, the support I gave her, the love I showed, somehow weren't enough. By the time the sun began to set, the numbness in my chest was replaced by something colder. Anger had taken root. But this wasn't the hot, impulsive rage that clouded your judgment. This was different. It was sharp, deliberate, and unforgiving. I grabbed my laptop and began researching divorce lawyers, determined to find someone who specialized in infidelity cases. If Jenna wanted to burn our marriage to the ground, I was going to make sure she didn't walk away with everything intact. But even as I planned the practicalities of a divorce, a darker thought lingered in the back of my mind. She deserves more than legal consequences. She deserves to feel the pain she inflicted on me. The thought of revenge didn't sit well at first. I wasn't that kind of person, or at least, I hadn't been. But as I stared at the empty space on the mantel where our anniversary photo once sat, I realized I didn't care anymore. Jenna had stripped me of my dignity, my trust, my love. If she thought she could walk away unscathed, she was wrong. Before I could act, I needed to be sure. Sure that last night wasn't a one-time mistake or some cry for help she'd spin to justify her actions. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. That night, while Jenna showered, I slipped into her office and unlocked her work laptop. The password was simple, our anniversary date. It felt like a cruel joke. As the screen lit up, I quickly navigated to her emails. Most of it was mundane office correspondence, but one folder caught my attention. Personal. Inside were the messages I dreaded and expected. Emails with the man I'd seen her with at the hotel. His name was Eric, a senior partner at her firm. Their exchanges were flirtatious at first, but as I scrolled further back, they grew more explicit. Words that made my stomach turn, plans for secret rendezvous, even photos. Some I couldn't bring myself to look at for long. The timestamps on the emails told the whole story. This wasn't new. It had been going on for months, maybe longer. I copied everything onto a flash drive, my hands trembling with a mix of fury and disgust. Over the next few days, I played the perfect husband. I smiled when she spoke, nodded when she mentioned her busy work schedule, and even cooked dinner one night to throw off suspicion. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies behind her smile, the betrayal hidden in her casual gestures. But I knew I had to be patient. Rushing this would ruin everything. While she was at work, I made my moves. I met with the divorce lawyer, who assured me that with the evidence I had, I'd be in a strong position. Infidelity cases can be tricky, he said, but with these emails and her financial dependency on you, you'll come out ahead. I also invested in a small GPS tracker, which I discreetly placed in her car one evening. I needed to know her every move, every meeting, every lie. It felt invasive, but so was the way she betrayed our vows. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed to move forward. Proof of her affair, a plan for the divorce, and an idea that had been growing in the darker corners of my mind. Revenge wasn't just an option. It was necessary. As I lay in bed that night, Jenna asleep beside me, her breathing steady and peaceful, I felt no love for her anymore. Only the weight of her betrayal and the cold satisfaction of knowing that soon she would feel what I felt. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following Monday, I began the next phase of my plan. Jenna left early for work, her laptop and briefcase in hand, dressed impeccably in a fitted blazer that I now realized wasn't for her job but for him. I kissed her goodbye at the door, just as I always had, and watched her drive away. The GPS tracker I had planted in her car was already active. I checked my phone, pulling up the live feed of her movements. Sure enough, she wasn't heading to her office. Her car veered off toward a part of town we rarely visited, eventually stopping at a coffee shop. Not 5 minutes later, Eric's car appeared on the map, parking right next to hers. I clenched my jaw, staring at the screen as the dots on the map moved in unison. They weren't even trying to hide it. I waited until they left, then followed their route through the tracker. It didn't surprise me when their destination turned out to be the same hotel I'd seen them at before. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white as I drove to the parking lot a few minutes later. I parked far enough away to avoid detection, but close enough to confirm it was them. They walked in together, laughing like teenagers sneaking out of school. Jenna's arm brushed his as they entered the lobby, and he placed his hand lightly on her lower back, guiding her toward the elevators. I felt a surge of anger but forced myself to stay calm. The moment to confront her would come, but it wasn't now. For now, I needed to ensure I had everything lined up. After they disappeared into the hotel, I headed back home and reviewed the evidence I'd gathered so far. The emails, the GPS logs, the photos of them entering the hotel. It was a devastatingly clear narrative. But I needed one final piece to ensure there was no room for her to manipulate the situation. That evening, I reached out to a private investigator. His name was Greg, a gruff but professional man who came highly recommended. I shared what I had and explained what I needed. He nodded, taking notes as I spoke. "Catch them in the act," I said. "I need photographic evidence." Greg smirked. "People like this are predictable. Give me a week, and I'll have everything you need." As I waited for Greg's results, I continued to play my role as the unsuspecting husband. Jenna's behavior grew bolder, almost as if she thought I'd stopped noticing. She stayed out late more often, her excuses flimsier each time. I kept my responses neutral, never letting on that I knew the truth. When our delayed anniversary celebration finally rolled around, she suggested dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it was an opportunity to set my plan in motion. The night of the dinner, she dressed to perfection, her makeup flawless, her demeanor light and cheerful. To anyone watching, we looked like the perfect couple, but as I watched her sip her wine, laughing at some joke I barely heard, all I could think about was the weight of the flash drive in my pocket. After dessert, I slid a small gift box across the table. Jenna's eyes lit up as she opened it, revealing a silver bracelet I had picked out months ago, before I knew what she was capable of. "Oh, it's beautiful," she cooed, slipping it onto her wrist. "Thank you, babe." "There's more," I said, my voice calm. I handed her an envelope. "I put together a slideshow of our favorite memories. Thought you'd enjoy it." Her smile faltered slightly as she accepted the envelope, her fingers brushing against mine. Inside was the flash drive, innocuously labeled with her initials. "What's on it?" she asked, her voice a little too casual. "Just some special moments," I replied. "I think you'll find it enlightening." She didn't ask any more questions, tucking the envelope into her purse, but I could see the unease flickering in her eyes. She knew something wasn't right. That night, as we drove home, I felt a strange sense of calm. Jenna's betrayal was no longer a secret buried under layers of denial and excuses. It was out in the open, its weight now hers to bear. And soon, she would see the full extent of what she had done. When we arrived home, she went straight to the bedroom, muttering something about being tired. I didn't follow her. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, and waited. Because once she plugged in that flash drive and saw the contents, there would be no going back. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sipped my drink slowly, counting the minutes, imagining Jenna upstairs. Was she opening the envelope? Did she have the nerve to plug the flash drive into her laptop? Part of me hoped she would dismiss it, toss it aside in her purse, too distracted to care. But deep down, I knew Jenna too well. Curiosity would get the better of her, especially after my cryptic tone during dinner. I didn't have to wait long. The sound of her hurried footsteps echoed down the stairs. She appeared in the doorway of the living room, clutching the envelope in one hand, her other holding the flash drive like it might burn her fingers. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. I looked up at her, my expression unreadable. "You tell me. Did you watch it?" Her hand trembled as she waved the flash drive at me. "Why do you have this? How dare you go through my things?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the tension. "Your things? Jenna, those emails, those photos, that betrayal, those are my things too. My life, my trust. You didn't just break our vows. You made a fool out of me." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in years, Jenna looked cornered, her usual confidence stripped away. "Go ahead," I said, leaning forward, my voice calm but icy. "Tell me how this is my fault, how I forced you to cheat. I'm dying to hear it." She began, but her voice faltered. She glanced at the flash drive again, her face twisting with guilt and anger. "You were distant. You stopped caring, stopped trying. Don't." I slammed my glass down on the table, the sound making her jump. "Don't you dare try to blame me for what you did. I was here, Jenna. I was always here. You're the one who left, long before I found the emails. Before I followed you to that hotel." Her eyes widened in shock. You followed me?" "Yes," I said, my voice growing colder. "And I watched you walk into that hotel with Eric. I watched you laugh, touch him like you used to touch me. I saw it all, Jenna. And you didn't even bother to hide it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the room, suffocating. Jenna's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. "Why didn't you confront me then?" she asked softly, almost pleading. "Why didn't you say anything?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Because I wanted you to know how it feels. To live in uncertainty, to feel the ground shift beneath you. And because I wanted you to see that I'm not the fool you think I am." Jenna sank into the armchair across from me, her head in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I asked, my voice calm but cutting. "Why wasn't I enough for you?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "It started as something stupid, flirting at work, feeling wanted again. And then it spiraled. I thought I could stop, but you didn't," I interrupted. "You chose him, Jenna. Over me, over us." Her silence was answer enough. I stood, the drink in my hand forgotten. "I'm done," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done trying to make sense of this, trying to fix something you broke. I'm filing for divorce." She gasped, her tear-streaked face snapping up to meet mine. "No," she said, her voice panicked. "No, we can fix this. Please. I'll end it with Eric. I'll go to therapy, whatever you want. Just don't give up on us." I stared at her, my heart aching despite everything. Part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that we could go back to what we once had. But the other part, the one that had listened to her lies, that had seen her with another man, knew better. "This isn't something you can fix with promises," I said. "You didn't just betray me, Jenna. You betrayed everything we built together. And I won't let you take anything else from me." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking, but I felt no pity. Not anymore. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. As I closed the door behind me, I knew there was no turning back. The love I once felt for Jenna was gone, replaced by something colder. And as I began packing my things, I thought about the next steps, how I would ensure she understood the full weight of what she had done. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of her reckoning. The morning after our confrontation, Jenna's cries had faded into a heavy, oppressive silence. I woke up early, the weight of everything hanging over me like a storm cloud, but my resolve remained unshaken. She needed to know that her actions had consequences, and that I wasn't going to sit idly by while she destroyed everything we had built. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the dining table, my phone in hand. There were messages waiting for me, from the private investigator, Greg. I have what you need. Photos, video footage, and timestamps. Let me know how you want to proceed. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, send everything. Within minutes, my inbox lit up with the files. As I clicked through them, my chest tightened. There it was, Jenna with Eric, their interactions far from professional. Photos of them holding hands, laughing over drinks, kissing in parking lots. And the video, it confirmed everything. There was no room for denial or excuses anymore. I didn't wait for Jenna to wake up. I had already packed a bag with the essentials, leaving the rest of my belongings for later. As I set the suitcase by the door, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice raw from crying. "Out," I said simply, not bothering to meet her gaze. "Wait." She moved closer, her tone desperate. "We need to talk. Please, don't do this." I turned to face her, my expression cold. "Talk? About what, Jenna?" "About how you lied to my face. About how you destroyed our marriage. Because I'm done listening to excuses." She flinched but didn't back down. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but we can get through this. We've been through worse, haven't we?" "No," I said, my voice sharp. "We haven't. This isn't a rough patch, Jenna. This is you betraying me in the most unforgivable way. And now, you're going to face the consequences." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "What do you mean?" I stepped closer, holding her gaze. "I mean I'm done being the naive husband who trusted you. I've spoken to a lawyer. I have the evidence. And when this divorce is over, you'll be left with nothing." Her jaw dropped, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You think you're going to come out of this unscathed? We're in a no-fault state. The courts don't care about your evidence. I'll get half of everything, maybe more." I smiled, a cold, calculated smile that wiped the smugness from her face. "Not if I make sure everyone knows the truth about you and Eric. Your boss, your colleagues, your family. You built your little fantasy on lies, Jenna. Let's see how it holds up when the facade comes crashing down." I left the house without another word, her stunned silence following me out the door. I drove to my lawyer's office, clutching the flash drive and the files Greg had sent me. The evidence was damning, and it painted a clear picture of Jenna's infidelity. When I handed everything over to the lawyer, he nodded approvingly. "This will help," he said. "With these, we can push for a settlement that favors you. And if she tries to fight it, we'll make sure the court sees the full extent of her behavior." The thought of Jenna being held accountable brought a flicker of satisfaction. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Over the next few days, I began to dismantle the life Jenna had taken for granted. I sent anonymous emails to her firm's HR department, attaching the evidence of her affair with Eric. I wasn't sure what action they would take, but I knew it wouldn't go unnoticed. I also reached out to her family, her parents, her sister. I kept the message short, sending only a few key screenshots from the emails I had uncovered. They deserved to know who Jenna had become, the person she had been hiding behind her polished exterior. The private investigator had even managed to capture video footage of Jenna and Eric entering a hotel room just days before. I considered sending it to Eric's wife, but I hesitated. Not out of mercy, but because I wanted to ensure that every move I made had the maximum impact. That night, as I sat in my new apartment, Jenna called. I didn't answer. The voicemails came one after another. Pleas, threats, apologies, and finally silence. I stared at my phone, feeling a strange sense of calm. This wasn't about reconciliation or revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from the wreckage Jenna had left behind. Tomorrow, I would file the divorce papers. And Jenna would learn that sometimes, the bridges you burn are the ones you can't cross back over. The morning after I filed for divorce, My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages. Jenna's name flashed repeatedly on the screen, but I ignored her. I knew what was coming: panic, desperation, and the inevitable threats. I wasn't interested. She had made her choices, and now she would have to live with them. Around midday, I got a call from Greg, the private investigator. "Thought you'd like an update," he said. "Your wife's workplace seems to be taking the evidence seriously. Word is, Eric's under investigation, and they've pulled Jenna into HR for questioning." The satisfaction that washed over me was immediate, but it didn't last long. This wasn't just about her career. It was about her realizing the full extent of her betrayal. "Good," I said, my tone cold. "Let them deal with her. Keep me posted." Later that evening, I got an unexpected email from one of Jenna's coworkers. It was short and to the point. "Your wife had a meltdown in the office today. Rumor has it HR is considering disciplinary action. Eric's wife showed up at work too, made quite a scene. Thought you'd want to know." I read the message twice, a grim smile forming on my face. Eric's wife must have received the anonymous package I'd sent her. It had included the same photos and emails I'd given to my lawyer, along with a polite note: "You deserve to know the truth." It was only a matter of time before the cracks in their lives widened, exposing the rot underneath. That night, Jenna showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard the frantic pounding on my door before I even reached the hallway. When I opened it, she stood there, disheveled and wild-eyed, holding a folder stuffed with papers. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hissed, pushing past me into the living room. "You're trying to ruin my life." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Funny. That's exactly how I felt when I found out you were cheating on me." She whirled around, the anger in her eyes blazing. "You went to HR? You sent those photos to Eric's wife? Are you insane? You're destroying everything." I stayed calm, my voice low and measured. "No, Jenna, you destroyed everything. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." She paced the room, clutching her folder like a lifeline. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Eric's wife showed up at the office screaming, "HR suspended me while they investigate. My reputation is ruined. And Eric—" I cut her off, stepping closer. "Eric? Do you really think I care about what happens to him? Or to you, for that matter? You didn't care about our marriage, Jenna. You didn't care about me. So why should I care about your precious career?" Her lip trembled, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I had once loved. Vulnerable, hurt, and lost. But the sympathy I might have felt was long gone. "This isn't you," she said softly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're not vindictive. You're not cruel." I tilted my head, studying her. "You're right. I wasn't. But you made me this way." She sank onto the couch, her anger dissolving into sobs. "I was stupid. I made a mistake. Please, let's fix this. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just don't do this to us." I stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. But I knew better than to believe her. This wasn't about fixing our marriage. It was about her saving herself. "There is no us anymore," I said finally. "You ended that the moment you stepped into that hotel with him." Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no pity. Instead, I opened the door and gestured for her to leave. "Get out, Jenna, and don't come back." She hesitated, her tear-streaked face searching mine for any sign of mercy. When she found none, she stood slowly, clutching her folder. Without another word, she walked out the door, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. After she left, I sat in silence, the anger and satisfaction warring within me. Jenna's meltdown, her pleading, it didn't change anything. She had shattered our marriage, and I wasn't going to let her sweep it under the rug. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. There was one more move to make. I pulled out my phone and dialed Eric's wife. She answered after the second ring, her voice sharp and bitter. "Who is this?" "It doesn't matter who I am," I said. "But I think we have a common enemy. Do you want to talk?" There was a long pause before she replied, her voice tinged with curiosity and anger. "I'm listening." As I began to lay out my plan, a grim sense of purpose settled over me. Jenna and Eric thought they could betray the people who trusted them and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. Eric's wife, Sarah, was surprisingly receptive. She didn't need convincing. She had suspected the affair long before receiving my anonymous package. What she lacked was proof. I provided everything: the photos, the emails, the video footage. By the time I finished, her anger mirrored my own. "This man humiliated me," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "He won't get away with this." "We can work together," I replied, laying out the plan. "He needs to face consequences, and so does Jenna. But more importantly, they need to feel what it's like to have their lives fall apart." Sarah agreed, and together, we began strategizing. Her goal was to ensure Eric lost his career, his social standing, and any semblance of control he had over their assets. I shared my own plans for Jenna, and we coordinated our next steps. Revenge wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming the power they had taken from us. Over the next few weeks, the fallout began to spread. Sarah went public with the evidence of Eric's infidelity, using social media to share just enough to create a storm without incriminating herself legally. Friends, colleagues, and even clients of Eric began to distance themselves. The whispers turned into full-blown rumors, and soon, Eric was forced to take a leave of absence from his prestigious firm. Jenna wasn't spared either. Her HR investigation escalated, and when Eric's wife's post surfaced, her company decided it was best to terminate her, to protect the company's reputation. She called me that night, sobbing, but I didn't answer. This was what she deserved. With the groundwork laid, the divorce proceedings began. My lawyer, armed with the evidence of Jenna's affair, played hardball. While Jenna had assumed she'd walk away with half of everything, the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement told a different story. She was entitled to very little. Jenna's lawyer tried to negotiate, but I refused to budge. "She destroyed our marriage," I told my lawyer. "She doesn't deserve a single penny more than the minimum." The final settlement left Jenna with a small fraction of our assets and no alimony. Her attempts to fight back crumbled when Sarah provided additional testimony about the affair, cementing Jenna's reputation as a liar and a cheat. With the divorce finalized, I made one final move to sever all connections to Jenna. I sold the house, the one where we had built a life together, and moved into a new apartment closer to work. I deleted her number, blocked her on every platform, and told mutual friends that I wanted no updates about her. The silence was liberating. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Jenna was struggling, unemployed, ostracized by her peers, and drowning in debt. She had moved back in with her parents. Eric, once her partner in betrayal, had ghosted her after his own life began to crumble. She sent me a letter, handwritten, desperate. In it, she begged for forgiveness, claiming she still loved me and wanted another chance. I read it once, then shredded it without replying. There was no going back. Sarah wasn't finished with Eric. After filing for divorce, she pursued him aggressively in court, ensuring he lost custody of their children and most of his assets. She sold their house, kept their shared business ventures, and even exposed his behavior to his family, leaving him utterly alone. When Sarah called to update me, her voice was light, almost cheerful. "He's a broken man," she said, "and it feels damn good." Months passed, and the chaos began to settle. My life, once consumed by anger and betrayal, found a new rhythm. I focused on work, reconnected with old friends, and even started therapy to process the trauma. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. One evening, I met someone new, Emma. She was kind, funny, and honest in a way that felt refreshing. There were no games, no hidden agendas, just a genuine connection. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. 1 year after Jenna's betrayal, I sat in my new apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The pain, the anger, the revenge. It had all been necessary to rebuild myself. But as I looked around at the life I had created, I realized something important. Jenna no longer had power over me. She was a part of my past, a lesson learned, but not someone who could define my future. I picked up my phone and texted Emma, "Dinner tomorrow night?" My treat. Her reply came quickly. "I'd love that." As I set the phone down, a sense of peace washed over me. The chapter with Jenna was closed, and a new one was beginning. One where I was free, stronger, and ready to embrace the life I deserved.